you guys! Today we're talking about tables.
No, not that kind of table, silly. This kind of table. You know, the ones you used to have to use in math class? Well, we're going to be adding them to your business letter that you completed in the last video. So go ahead and open that up. Now we're going to be inserting a table into our business letter, and the reason we're talking about tables right now is because the next unit we go on to is Excel, and Excel is basically the same thing as a giant table. So let's break down the basics of tables first so that you totally get the idea before we insert them. A table is made up of rows and columns, and in Word we call the intersection of a row and column in a table a cell. So when we move on to Excel, there's where that terminology comes from. So the intersection of a row and a column is a cell. And our table also has dimensions, and the dimension is how many columns the table has by the number of rows. So in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, so we have a 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows. So our table's dimension is 4 by 10. So let's go ahead and let's practice inserting a table into our Word document, in this case our business letter. So just like when I insert a picture into Word, when I insert a table I need to tell Word where I want the table. Now I want it in my third paragraph right after this. So I'm going to click after and I'm going to press enter twice, because I should have a blank line in between every paragraph on a business letter. And then to insert the table, I go up to Insert, Tab on the ribbon, and then I go to Table. And now this actually has a bunch of these little cells, and as I highlight over the cells, it's going to add them down on my table, and these cells are the cells of my table and my table's dimension. So if I wanted a 3 by 3 table, I would just highlight over 3 by 3. Now this goes all the way up to 10 by 8. Let's say you needed bigger than 10 by 8. You could just click Insert Table, and then you could type in your columns and your rows. Okay, but for now, I'm just going to be on Insert Table, and let's practice with a 3 by 3 table. And if I have that highlighted, then I need to click. If I scroll down, it's now inserted a 3 by 3 table for me. I also want to draw your attention to the fact, like when we inserted pictures, we had a Picture Tools tab on the ribbon. When we inserted our table, we now have Table Tools. And we actually have a Design tab within Table Tools and a Layout tab within Table Tools. So let's talk about navigating our table. In order to insert any data or type in a cell, all we need to do is click in the table where we want that, and then we can begin typing. Now the top row of our table needs to tell us what the heck is going underneath it. There need to be some column headings. So this column, I want to say characters' names. Now some of you might not be doing the Walking Dead letterhead. That's fine, but for the purposes of you learning how to use tables, let's just have you copy what I'm doing on my table. So if I'm writing characters' names or whatever I'm going to be writing from here on out, just follow along with me. It might not make sense at all in your letter, but I want you to practice it. So just do what I'm doing for my table. Now I could just click in this column, but that gets kind of old if I'm having to move my mouse and click in all these columns. Instead, I can move left to right in a table simply by pressing Tab. So if you press Tab, it's going to move you to the next cell. Now if I want to go backwards, I press Shift Tab, and it's going to move me backwards in a cell. Okay, so Tab moves us forward cell to cell. Shift Tab moves us backwards. So I want to say my character's name, and maybe I want to say how many years on the show they were, and I'm pressing Tab. And maybe I want to say relationships on the show. Again, this might not make sense for your letter, but go ahead, type character's name, years on show, and relationships in your table. So just keep following along with me. Now if I want to get down a line, I could either just click down a line. Now if I press enter, it's just adding more space within that cell. So it's just making my cell bigger if I press enter. Now if I want to actually get down a cell, I can use my arrow keys, and that will move me down. Now down goes down, obviously the up arrow key goes up, right goes right, left goes left. But if you press enter when you're in a cell, it's just going to add space within that cell. Okay, so if I want to move down a cell, I either have to press tab or I have to use my arrow keys. So let's start filling our table in with some information. So my first character on the show is Rick.
And we're currently in the 6th season. Rick's been on all 6 seasons, so he's been 6 years on the show. He was originally married to Lori, who was his wife. He also has Carl, his son.
Carl! 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 Carl!
And then he has Judith, his daughter. And I'm just pressing tab to get to the next cells. So next we had Lori, and spoiler alert, she actually died in season 3. So she was only on the show for 3 years. She had Rick, who was her husband. Then she had Carl, who was her son, and Judith, who was her daughter.
And I have more characters. And I'm like, oh crap, I only have 2 rows. If you're in the last cell of a table and you need another row, you can just press tab and it will add that other row. Otherwise, let's say I go back a step, undo, I can right click on that cell and I can insert, and I can now either insert a row above Lori or I could do it below. Well, I want it below, so I'm just going to press below.
And I have another row. I can press undo again, and the last way I could insert a row below is by hovering right over the edge of where I want to insert my row, and you'll see that blue bar pop up with the plus. Then I simply click plus, and I've got my final row. So my last character right now, I'm going to do Carl. He has been on all 6 years. He has Rick, who's his dad. He has Lori, who's his mom. He has Judith, who's his sister. And I press tab to enter my last one. So I can do Judith. She was born in season 3 when Lori died. Ooh, spoiler alert again. So she's only been on it 3 years. She has Rick as her dad. Lori is her mom, and Coral is her brother. So make sure you've added another 2 rows, either by using tab, right-click insert, or by pressing the blue plus and insert Coral's and Judith's information.
So now we've learned how to insert extra rows if we're in the last cell by pressing tab, or I can right-click and do an insert rows above or below. Notice that you also see columns to the left and columns to the right.
You can also hover over and use that blue plus, and this works for columns as well. So I could hover in between a column, and I could add a column in between if I wanted to that way.
So let's say I wanted to put a column to the right of this that tells me whether my character is alive or dead. I'm in my last column, right click, insert, and now I can insert a column to the left or the right. Well, I want it on the right, so I'm going to the right. I'm going to say dead or alive, question mark, and now I'm using my arrow keys to move down. Rick is alive, Lori's dead, Carl's alive. Okay, I have this extra row here I don't need. If I don't need the row, right click it, and I can delete either by cells. So if I just click delete cells, it's going to tell me, do I want to move all these cells to the left? Do I want to move them all up? Or I can delete entire rows and columns. So I want to delete the entire row and click OK. So if you need to add or delete rows, it's pretty easy. You're just right-clicking and choosing Insert if you want to add rows or columns. If you need to delete rows or columns, you're just right-clicking and doing Delete.
At this point, you should have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4 dimension table.
And now the last thing I want to add is a row that's actually going to have the whole title of my show across the top.
So I could go to my top row and do right-click, insert, and choose to insert a row above. Or the other way we could do it was hovering on the left side and waiting until we got the blue plus. Now notice I can't get that blue plus at the top of my table, So if I want to do it this way, I have to insert the row in between character's name and Rick. And then what I could do is I could highlight this entire row, and I could use my drag and drop cut method to move that information all down a row.
And it has it as 4 separate cells right away. Now I want it to say Walking Dead all the way across and centered. So what I can do is actually merge cells or squish all of these 4 cells together into one. So first I need to tell Word which cells I'm merging. So I'm just going to click and drag to highlight these cells. Okay, so I'm merging or squishing these 4 cells. Then I'm just going to right click and I'm going to choose merge cells. And now I have one big, huge cell. Now if you made a mistake, you can also split cells, which is the opposite. So if I needed those 4 back again, I could right click and I could split into 4 columns and I'd go back. But I want you to merge all these cells together. So we have one, and then let's center our table and say The Walking Dead. Woohoo! Now that we have a table inserted into our letter, let's use those Table Tools tabs up here on the ribbon to do some formatting. So you can format the text in a table just like you format the text in a Word document. You would just highlight it, you can change the size, you can bold it, you can change the fonts of your tables within individual cells. You just have to make sure you highlight what you want and then use your Home tab to format that way. You can also format the table as a whole. So let's say I want this whole table in the center. When I highlight over this table, notice there's that little cross here in the upper corner. That's going to select our whole table if we click it. So go ahead and click it, and it's now selected our whole table. Now I can format my whole table. So the first thing we're going to do is go up to the Layout tab up here, and we're actually going to format the width of our columns or our cells to fit all the information. So right now, this relationships column doesn't need to be that long. Dead or Alive doesn't need to be that long. I'm going to be in the Layout tab, and I'm going to click Auto Fit, and I want to auto fit to the contents. And when I did that, notice it's compressed my table so that it's as small as kind of the longest thing in that cell. So that's one thing I can do to format this table. I can also format my text within my table under this Alignment tab. So within my cells, I can center and center all text. I can center vertically in the cell and center left on this line. Okay, so let's say that I wanted all of these to not be right at the top. If I highlighted them and changed it to center, now I have all my names kind of in the middle of those cells. So if I wanted to do that, I can change my alignment there. The other thing I can do is format my whole table to be centered within the page. So again, I'm selecting my whole table by using that little crosshair. I'm going to the Home tab, and I'm just going to center my table on the home page. I could right align it if I wanted, left, but I want it centered. And the last type of formatting we can do for our table is under the Design tab. So we can add a table style. Just like we had picture styles, we now have table styles. If you hover over, it will show you what it looks like. Or, you can drop down and you can get some more options. So if I like this one, I can click there, and then I might have to go back to the Home tab and recenter. So go ahead, pick a table style for your table, and then make sure you have the whole table centered. Then you can do some formatting within your table after you've chosen a style. So if I wanted these to be all uppercase, I could do that. If I want all of these to be aligned in the middle, I can redo that. So once you apply styles, you might have to go back. If you've used the Design tab to do a style, you might have to go back and do some other formatting as you wish. Just make sure you highlight what you want and then use your Home tab to do any formatting you want. So make sure you've got your table inserted. It should be centered in the middle of your page, and you can also have added any style you wanted and done any formatting. When you're done with that, you're going to do a final save,
and you're going to submit your business letter test to the Tables video tutorial assignment on Schoology.
Woohoo!
Hey, kid, I want you to spill your guts. Tell us everything. Everything.
Everything. Okay, I'll talk. In third grade, I cheated on my history exam. In fourth grade, I stole my Uncle Max's toupee and I glued it on my face when I played Moses in my Hebrew school play. In fifth grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog. But the worst thing I ever done, I mixed up all this fake puke at home, and then I went to this movie theater, hid the puke in my jacket, climbed up to the balcony, and then I made a noise like this. And then I dumped it over the side. And all the people in the audience, then this was horrible. All the people started getting sick and throwing up all over each other. I never felt so bad in my entire life.
I'm beginning to like this kid, Ma.